Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The SPA in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is intentional living. Amazing people like you share ways to live by design and with purpose to ensure that this short ride of life occurs with choice, physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-giving knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and creating a positive impact through intentional living. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Sarah K. Grace, who used her psychic abilities while working as a paramedic in the busy California 911 system for 15 years. Helping countless people through extreme crisis and death, she became a specialist in physical and energetic support during people's worst moments. Sarah is now a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and renowned intuitive healer. Specializing in psychic surgery and custom treatment programs, she can help you pull your life out of the ditch, no matter how severe your situation. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi, Diane. Good morning. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Great having you here. And, I know people are going to have all kinds of questions around this. And let's just start with talking about your early years, about how you came to know that you had psychic abilities.
It was nothing that I wanted. It's important to start there. So I grew up in a tiny town in South Dakota, pre-internet, and I was just a normal kid, or so I thought, until the age of 7. One day I woke up and it began for me with clairvoyance. I started being able to see auric fields and colors around people, and then it kept increasing to where I could sense thoughts and I knew what was going to happen, and I could see disease in people's bodies and tell if they were lying. And it really became this stimulus overload from an early age. I was raised, unfortunately, in a very volatile and unstable household, and I didn't really feel safe in asking. But when it got to be so intense, I finally asked a family member, and they did the hellfire and brimstone bit. Like, don't ever talk about this out loud. You'll get sent away. There's something wrong with you. And so at the age of 7, just wanting to be normal and fit in like everybody, I really developed a sense of toxic shame. I was like, oh my gosh, well, like, what's wrong with me? Why can I see these things and other people can't, And so that kind of began the long odyssey with the gifts and the energetic awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you rectify that within yourself? I know really just a handful of people that have this gift, and there's always the kind of this similar story of being told don't tell anybody else, or this whole craziness. And in fact, one of my friends, her father was a preacher, and it was like you said, it's like they look at it as completely negative. Luckily for her, at some point they started telling her to look at it as discernment, right? There's a way for you to look at it and a way to help you. What were some of the tools or things that you were able to do to kind of help you get through this journey, if you will, of where people didn't understand where you were coming from?
Well, because of the sense of toxic shame that I developed at an early age, in addition to the pretty significant violence in my household growing up, I didn't have a sense of self or a sense of stability. And so thinking that there was something wrong with me on top of kind of trying to overcome and survive a lot of extreme violence for the first long while, it set me on a trajectory where I did anything. I kind of went off the rails in my late teens, early 20s, because I was just looking for a sense of safety or personal power or a way to cope with, right, all of the stimulus. So just, it's almost like, being on acid in Times Square 24/7, there's just all of this sensory input, and then having that with no assistance or explanation on top of a lot of other things. For me, I got into drugs and alcohol, and I actually went down the rabbit hole to the point that I overdosed and had a near-death experience at the age of 19 or 20. And it was that I took it down into those depths because I lacked a sense of self. right? And I was just trying so hard. And I think that there's a lot of people that are kind of in this space right now. And so my message to you guys is like, wherever you are, it's okay. All right. And you're doing the best you can with what you have. And when you know better, you do better. Right.
Mhm.
So it took me hitting rock bottom, literally done, having a near-death experience where I was given the option. And essentially, when I was in that expanded state, they're like, we get it's hard. I mean, they were far more eloquent, but they were like, we get it's hard for you, but should you choose to come back, you're going to be able to help a lot of people with this.
Mm.
So obviously I chose to come back. But I didn't realize that I was still going to have to do the legwork. I had to, face my own fears, my own shadow, my own addiction cycles, my own programs, subconscious programs and patterns. And when it was a super long kind of pulling myself out of that world. And eventually I moved all over the country. I did a bunch of different things, but eventually landed myself in California. And my intuition, every time an ambulance would go by, was like, that, go do that. And I was so scared of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, no way, man. I could like kill somebody if I mess up, I didn't realize that there was a million steps between where you start and then where you're, the senior medic running the call. But it wasn't until ultimately I went through the UCLA EMT program and I started in South Central Los Angeles 911. And that began the 15-year odyssey of the energy just started working through me on the 911 calls. And I became the paramedic who was always there for death and extreme crises. And so after I was still closeted, I didn't want to be like with all the alpha fire dudes and SWAT dudes being like, oh, I see dead people, like I finally fit in somewhere and I finally was like being taken seriously. And so I still didn't want to be weird. So I was still closeted, but they could feel it on calls. And they were like, what are you doing? And I didn't know. I just knew that my experience would be an expanded state. Everything would slow down and crystallize. I would know 2 or 3 stages ahead what was going to happen on the call before it did. I always taste metal when death is near. It's still one of my tells to this day. And I developed kind of protocols for what to do for obviously the physical body as a paramedic, but for the soul that was dying and going through that transition, whether it be a trauma call or a medical call, many, many, many experiences like that. And it ultimately turned into a gift. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What's your sense of, do you feel that anyone could have access to this, but they don't take that path? Do you feel like, how do you distinguish between you being born with this gift and this being your special gift versus how do you think can other people actually access that?
Yes, I believe everyone can to varying degrees. So everyone has intuition, gut feeling, like, who's going to call and they do. So that kind of thing. And then if you think of it like think of it like a film projector. And between the film projector and the screen, there's just a whole bunch of different films, right? And the films are essentially diluting down the stimulus because the energetics are around all of us at all times, right? It's just the person's nervous system and how their endocrine system is wired. It tends to be more attuned or like an antenna. So when you are energetically sensitive, there's a full spectrum. Everyone has the capability. I have heard that it is genetic. I did have genetically in my family. And I have heard that it's activated by trauma, especially blows to the head, which I've certainly had plenty of those growing up. So it's kind of like all of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you are gifted or if you do have a sensitivity, I always advocate that you figure out and just be curious about it. Like, okay, so is it that you feel everybody else's feelings? Okay, so that could be clairsentient or that could be empathic. Okay, if you're taking it on and holding it in your body, that's going to be empathic. Did you know you don't have to do that? And then there's all these tools. And so it's really curiosity about, do you see, do you hear, do you feel, do you know, do you astral travel, do you see dead people? Like, what's your jam, right? Being curious, being open, and then figuring out the ways to navigate it.
Right. So, there's a lot, it feels like, especially over the last couple of years, people who've been feeling isolated. There's a lot of like kind of fear in the space. What are some of the tools that you use to move past fear or to just get on the other side of it? And, I don't know how, when you have things come up, do you now fully embrace everything that happens, or do you still kind of move through a sense of fear or a knowing?
Oh yeah, I think that that's a natural part of the human condition, and as many times as we go down and into our own shadow and face our own stuff, there's always, it seems to me, another layer deeper. But what it is that we have the skill set, the tools, so our reaction is a bit less, or maybe we move through it a little bit more quickly. So in terms of fear, it's natural. B, it's really, really easy to be controlled when you're in fear, because you're disassociated from your own personal power. Okay. And the first thing to ask, that I ask myself, and it's just at this point, girl, I've been burned to the ground so many times and just have like gone through so much life experience where I had to build myself back up and then like learn from the experience and integrate the wisdom, and is first, like, have you been here before? Right. And think of like the worst thing that you experienced that however many years ago you were sure you were never going to make it through, and you did. Right. So you have tangible proof that you're capable of integrating and moving through whatever the fear is. Second, it's really about personal accountability, like really, really having the courage to get honest with yourself about like what it is that you're up to, right? Because a lot of people are hiding and anesthetizing because it's so intense out there, and because there is so much fear, and the fear triggers the cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which throws off the endocrine system, which are all the hormones. You go, hormones are out of whack and you feel crappy, and then the GI goes, and it's just like this whole thing, right?
Right.
Okay, so how much Xanax are you doing? How many pills are you taking? Like, how much are you drinking? Like, what are you actually up to? How much screen time? Like, what is it that we're doing to distract from the fear? If we can have the courage to like really get real with ourselves and then understand. So A, it's personal accountability. B, it's willing to, well, first you got to know it can be different, because there's a lot of people that are just so bombarded and they're just trying to like basic level survive right now that they don't even get that it could be different. Right. And so second is like, hey, it can be different. And then third is like, what are we actually up to, and how can we start to shift that from a super like tiny little connect the dots kind of level, like nothing big, fancy, or uber spiritual. It's like, now down and dirty. Like, what do we do when we're in it, right? When everything's exploding around us, or we're vapor locked in fear, like what is it that we can do as individuals? And it begins with that. One, you've made it through before. Two, you have choice and personal power. And three, it can be different.
Yeah. Well, I think coming from experience, I think that's, super helpful. Like you said, when people are in it, it's like that peripheral vision isn't there, and it's not really supporting you because you've got all the emotion and just the psychological and just everything that's going on around that. Because you have been there and you really have hit that rock bottom, and also going through the fog of substance and that as well. What was kind of like that one small step that you took that allowed you to start moving through that and coming through it?
I had to start with where I was, which was pretty far down at the time. And so I had to shut out all of the noise, because a lot of times when you're down, it's like people are oftentimes not helpful. It's like they want to like antagonize, or just like, I told you so. It's like, dude, not helping, So I had to like close out the noise, and I sat down with a notebook, and I was just like, all right, like, what are my issues? And for me at the time, the first time I did this in my life, it was pretty significant. There was like, I was smoking 3 packs a day, I was drinking, I was doing all kinds of drugs, and I had all kinds of stuff. And so I had to tackle each of those one at a time. But first I wrote it all out, right? And then what I did was like, okay, this is a lot, but what can I do right now? I've always exercised. Running way super long runs out in the country used to be it saved me growing up. So I started to connect to movement again. I started to get myself outside again. And through that, it just began the process. So instead of doing X, which you're used to doing, so whatever substance or whatever, like instead of doing that, let's try to just shift the behavior a little bit with something that's healthier, or a little bit it's going to start to move you through. And the more I started to exercise, then the less I wanted to eat crappy. And then the cigarettes started to drop away, and like all of these things. And so that's kind of how I did it, is to shift from one thing to the other. But it's very important to pull your power back and to kind of get into a quiet space, because everybody's where they're at. And for whatever reason, when people are down, especially in family dynamics and interpersonal relationships dynamics, it always tends to be the people that are closest to us that can hit us.
Right.
Right. And it's like, oh my gosh, because they know all those buttons and triggers. So just take some space from that. It doesn't mean you have to like never talk to them again, but this is about learning to reconnect to yourself and then do something a little bit different.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned about motion. I just, I've always heard about when you look at emotion, in order to really be able to process emotion, look at it, that you have to be in motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you actually, by moving your body, by moving yourself, you can then have, excuse me, emotions move through your body, like they're an actual thing. And a lot of times people feel like emotions can get stuck, but being in movement actually allows them to move through you. And you can feel like a lot of different things, but when you move, you get a different perspective, you get to be able to feel them differently and then be able to have some relief from them as well. And I love the introspection that you have, and for people to look at, hey, have the awareness of where you're at, and then be able to look at where you move from there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you also talk about just as one of the fears is, the fear of death, right? And a lot of times you talk about how having that fear limits us from living life. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. This is one of my favorite takeaways from being a paramedic and being around and seeing as much death as I have, is that I have an up close and personal vantage point that most people don't. And it's important to understand that there is nothing to fear in death, and that it is absolutely 100% inevitable for all of us. It is part of the human condition. It is the birth-death cycle, that we can't have life without death. Mm. The deal is we live in a culture that is age phobic and death phobic, and all things praised to the young and commercialized, right? Fortunately, we as a society are waking up and kind of seeing through that. And that's a large part of what's been happening over the last number of years, of people like, I don't know about this anymore. But when I've seen, I actively transitioned probably 20 to 30 people as they were dying, and then seen hundreds of dead bodies in all shapes, sizes, and various stages of decomposition. And so being in that space, if A, we know it's inevitable, B, it's a very natural part of the process of life, C, we can take away and dispel the fear. So really what that boils down to is living. Because so many people, especially, oh my gosh, in the last couple of years, people are like bubble wrapping themselves and like doing everything possible to like fear. Oh no, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. But it's that paralysis that stagnates through the field, and the terror throws off our entire system. That actually does far more detriment, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we have an understanding, you guys, just like take a breath. Right? Like, how do you want to live? So if you knew that you had 2 weeks left, or you knew like, what is it that you want to do? Are you happy with your life? What are your actual like desires? And like, what would you love to see and experience before? And start to move through that. Like, eat the cake, go on the trip, burn the expensive candles, like do it now, because life is finite for all of us. Mm-hmm. And the more, again, we can pull our power back from like external, like fear, you're going to die. It's like, yeah, I get it. We're all going to die. So I'm just going to live. Like, here, hold my water. I'm going to go, right? Like go live it, because it's very paradoxical to the commercialized message of our culture. And at the same time, when we like see through all of it, it's like, yeah, okay, so at some point we all have an expiration date. What do you want to do with your time?
Right. That is such a powerful thing for people to really internalize. And I think for those of us who've been in emergency services, and see as much death as we do, we really get an up close experience of how short life can be and how you don't want to waste any of it. and how you really want to embrace that. In fact, when I'm laughing when you're talking about the bubble wrapping your life and people like afraid of breathing somebody else's air. And it's just like, this is humanity. Like we're always going to be exposed to things. We always can make the best choices. In fact, one of the things I used to say when all the lockdowns were going is I'm not participating in the pandemic. Like it's a perspective, right? It's how you're going to live your life. And are you going to let the unknown things keep you from living life? And I think there's still people who haven't jumped back in, right? Because they're living in that line of fear. And you talk a lot about having personal power to help you move through trauma. What does that look like?
Personal power is an awareness that we have the capacity to create our own reality. So again, in the culture that we are raised in, and this isn't good or bad, right or wrong, it just is. And again, things are shifting. People are waking up to the fact that, oh, wait, this is different. So the externalization of power is what we're taught in our culture, like to, give your power to the teacher, give your power to the doctor, give your power to whoever. Don't ask questions, just listen and take it. And really, though, ultimately, I understand that we are spiritual or energetic beings having a human experience. This is a finite little chunk of time. My understanding is through duality and the paradox of, high, low, light, dark, masculine, feminine, we're having our separate sense of separated experience, right, from unity consciousness. And so we have this moment, right, in the human experience when we understand if we're energetic or spiritual beings in physical form, we understand how to pull our power back from kind of this matrix, if you will, or the story of the culture and what's been shared. So through that, meditation, yoga, like when I was first, being closeted for 25 years and, having been through addiction and all the things that I put myself through, I had a lot of shame to work through, and so for me, I didn't even know where to start, much less like be super open. Oh yeah, I want to actually engage all this stuff that I ran from my whole life, right? It was a whole coming to terms with process. And so I had to just start where I was, understand that again, I have a choice, but I started with basic yoga meditation, started to reconnect to my body, started to feel empowered, because when you're connecting to your body, like you said, trauma lives in the body, you guys. It's stored in the subconscious programming, which is in the cells. So if we're disassociated, which the majority of our culture is not even living in their bodies, they're somewhere outside of themselves, which is again very easy to manipulate and control through fear. But when you learn to come down into your body through breath, through movement, through things like that, then you can start to face and navigate, whether it's your own trauma or learning how to feel your body, feel your emotions, understand what your thought processes are, stuff like that. So again, just starting with super basics. And then for me, because I'm in this world and I have a lot of different abilities, I had to become educated on all of them. And so I just took it one at a time, okay, I see stuff more than anything. That's my strength, is clairvoyance. All right. So then I learned about that. Right. And then the same with feeling everything and knowing everything, and mediumship is in the way of dead people, and shamanism, tons of shamanism. So medical intuition, mediumship, energy healing, it goes on and on, that I've been studying for a long, long time now.
Yeah. Just I'm reminded, really what was behind this podcast with SPAlife, the acronym for SPAlife is Seek Power Always, right? It's that power within you that we have. And there's so many times that we do look at power as something that happens outside of us, but the real power is, that we have within us, that we came here with this divine power, and to really be able to ground into the body. And I love the connection, the mind-body connection and spirit, it's all one. We're not just one aspect of that. It's all of that we get to show up as. And I think that it's such a great reminder for our listeners, especially when people are feeling dissociated or depressed or suicidal or all those things are going on, that it really is a choice, a decision. It's making just one step in the direction to stand for yourself, right? And to not give that power away for someone else to make those decisions for you, that, you can actually go, wait a minute, someone else doesn't know what's better for me more than me, and that we get to make those choices and start just one step in that direction.
Absolutely. And it's important to understand that the reason that a lot of people hesitate to do that is because it's easier to acquiesce power, because then we can be the victim.
Right.
And we get it. Look at our culture. It's very much victim mentality culture. And a lot of that is being rewarded. And what's happening is we've gotten to the point where a lot of people are just like, oh, okay, enough of this. Something's got to shift, right?
Right.
In terms of personal. And so when it comes to, it's not necessarily an easy thing, especially when it's the opposite of what we're taught. And if you want to authentically change your life, if you want to genuinely have the relationships or the finance or the career or the travel or the whatever that you genuinely want, it takes willingness to stand in ourselves and see and own not just the good parts, but the bad parts. And that's the part that tends to trick people up a lot, because it's like, oh, I love the good parts, right? But it's like, you guys, we all got shadow, right? And the more willing we are to just be like, oh, okay, I've got this part of myself and I'm just going to be with it. And what is it that I need to heal and to integrate this part? And then what happens is that becomes part of our power. It becomes part of the wisdom.
Right.
But we can't pass go if we're not willing to take responsibility. As long as we're like, oh, I'm this way because of X, Y, Z, it's an externalization of power. And if you stay in that space, it's ultimately, you're not going to be able to transcend as much.
Yeah, absolutely. Such wisdom. I mean, there's so much that's right before us if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, to be able to look at those things for ourselves and to step in that. One of the things around personal power is, what we create in our experience. And one of the things I love asking my guests is that we live differently in our kitchen, our living room, our bedroom. So what's your favorite room in your home and why?
Bedroom. Yeah, for sure. I love my bed. I love sleeping. My system is so sensitive. I need a lot of sleep. So 9 to 10 hours a night. I do a lot of meditating. Vipassana is one of my favorites, types of meditation and or guided imagery. Same with binaural audio. Those are all really great tools. If you haven't heard those are things that I do. So I love to just be alone and cozy in my room, having my little experience.
I love that. Well, I know our time is flying by here and that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they best do that?
SarahKGrace.com. So that's SarahKGrace.com. I do individual sessions with people all over the world. It's like a total system reset and essentially triage their life, energetically reset, and then give them a program to move forward with. And I've also got a sweet online community called the Grace Place. And it's a lot of energetically sensitive people coming to terms with their own power. And so you can find that on the website as well. In addition, YouTube. So Sarah K. Grace on YouTube.
Perfect. I love that. And as you know, our theme for this season is intentional living. So in what ways are you living an intentional life today?
I try to have fun every day as much as I can. To me, again, going back to that, this is all finite. What do I want with today? So I'll set my intention for each day, start it out with some movement, and then, just try not to take ourselves so seriously. Let's have some fun too.
I love it. So great. Well, I just want to thank you for being here with us today and sharing your journey and your wisdom and experience.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, everybody.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. And as Sarah mentioned early on, grab that notebook, see where you're at today, list it all out. It may seem overwhelming, but all you need to do is take one step, right? That you get to have that personal power within you. You get to make those choices. When you take responsibility for that, you can actually live the life that you choose. And we refer to that as spa life. So until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.